Welcome to the SNN Network Summer Virtual Event. We are pleased to introduce the next presenter for today's event, Glenn Mattis, President, CEO, and Director of TFF Pharmaceuticals. Glenn, the floor is yours.
Thank you and welcome. My name is Glenn Mattis, as was introduced here. I've been the CEO at TFF for the last 4 years, and I'm very happy to present the story on TFF Pharmaceuticals to you. Hopefully I'll be able to have some time left at the end to take some questions. Hope you're having a good conference and a good day. Just a quick reminder that we are working under a safe harbor statement that you can review and read at your pleasure. So TFF Pharmaceuticals is a company that is founded around a platform technology called thin film freezing. This technology has the ability to create dry powder drugs that are transformed and formulated off of the other compounds that are mostly in a solid state. Okay, these drugs usually come to us in need of formulation improvement, or the formulation application of thin film freezing allows us to get better absorption through the lung and distribution through the lung, which very often allows us the ability to dose at a lower level than the product that we're testing against, or allows us to get products into the patient in a much more efficient way when we're working on new chemical entities. Most drugs that are currently on the market are poorly absorbed, and that means that they have to be dosed at a fairly high level to get a therapeutic effect, and what often is compromised with the adverse events profile. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Let me talk to you about our business strategy. TFF develops products internally. In fact, we have 4 compounds that we're developing in our internal portfolio. We're at a clinical stage. So our 2 lead assets have actually made it into past phase 1 testing for dosing and safety. And we'll be testing those products in pivotal trials later this year. And the second part of our business strategy revolves around licensing our technology to partners, mostly in the pharmaceutical partners, but we also have meaningful contracts with the government and academia. We currently have 4 internal programs. I mentioned that 2 of them were in the clinic. That is an inhalable version of voriconazole. That's an antifungal compound that helps to treat diseases that are caused by fungal infection. Our second internal lead compound is an inhaled version of tacrolimus. Tacrolimus is used to treat or actually prevent the rejection of organs post-major target organ transplantation. We're developing it specifically as a lead indication in lung transplant, but this drug will also be ultimately developed for the other existing indications in heart, liver, and kidney transplants. We have a co-development agreement with AUGMENTA Bioworks. We are developing a monoclonal antibody, AUGMENTA 3387, that is being developed for COVID-19. We recently put out some very compelling data on the efficacy of this monoclonal antibody against COVID-19 and the 5 major variants, including the Delta variant. And last but certainly not least, we're working on an inhaled and oral version of niclosamide that also is being developed for the treatment of COVID-19, and we have a partnership on that project with Union Therapeutics. This technology is actually patented now we have over 58, I know the slide says 45, we have 58 patents that have either been issued or pending. Most of these patents are method of use and process, but one thing that I really want to point out here is that every time we do a thin film freezing version of a compound, we get a new composition of matter patent. So this is especially important for the compounds that we're developing, and especially important in the area of biologics, as you know, by extending the patent life and patent portfolio of biologics. It lends a lot of value to our potential partners and our existing partners. Personally, I've been in the industry now since 1979. As I mentioned, I've been the CEO of TFF now for 4 years. We have an outstanding, accomplished group of board directors on our board. They are experienced in many different aspects of the pharmaceutical industry. They help me run the business in a very efficient and productive way, and we're very pleased to be surrounded with that kind of assistance and with the quality of directors that we have in the company. As we move forward, the next slide, we should be on slide 5, is a brief slide that shows where we are in our portfolio. As I mentioned, voriconazole and tacrolimus, the thin film freezing versions of those, are entering into pivotal trials. We are developing these assets under the 505(b)(2) regulatory pathway strategy. These are products that are being repurposed and reformulated, and this will allow us to reach the marketplace much more quickly and with a much more efficient spend in our development programs. The niclosamide opportunity will be in the phase 1 clinic later this year, and our AUGMENTA 3387 program will be in the clinic early next year. We have a very, very broad portfolio of partnered programs. When I say partners, we are doing formulation work and feasibility work with now we have open 45 different material transfer agreements with partner companies at different stages, ranging from in vivo work back to in vitro work, and some of them we're at the term sheet stage where we would license our technology to these partners under the terms that would include upfront payments, milestones that are tied to clinical and regulatory outcomes, approval milestones, sales milestones, and then royalty. In the vaccine space, we have about 10 programs actually underway. In the academic arena, we're working with the University of Georgia, Dr. Ted Ross on the universal flu vaccine, Dr. Karthik Chandran working on VSV vaccine, and we just signed to work with Dr. Drew Weissman at the University of Pennsylvania, who is basically the inventor of the mRNA vaccines that are currently being used for COVID-19. In the government space, we work with the U.S. Army on some monoclonal antibody opportunities that we will be taking into animal testing very shortly. We have an agreement with Felix Biotechnology to have them license our technology to develop a phage-based compound. And we also have a relationship with Plus Products. They're a company that works in the cannabinoid space, and they are using our technology to formulate powder that would be used as an alternate to vaping in the both medicinal and recreational cannabinoid space. And that work has now evolved to market testing and hopefully commercialization later this year. And the last thing I want to talk about on this slide is a recent contract that we were awarded with through Leidos, a Fortune 500 company. We have a Department of Defense contract to apply the thin film freezing technology to the creation of countermeasures. And actually, these countermeasures using our technology will be administered through the skin or the eye to help fight off any germ or biologic warfare that our warriors might encounter in the field. Very exciting opportunity for us, being selected as the formulation partner of choice for this important work. So, as I said in the opening, our technology addresses the basic problem of being able to efficiently and effectively deliver products to the patient that might experience either low efficacy or an increase in adverse event profile based upon the formulation and their ability to be absorbed. By creating these powders and delivering them to the patient through capsules put into an inhaler device, we will increase the efficacy and certainly decrease the adverse events. And let me show you just how this technology works. So if you're looking at this slide, what's on the bottom of the slide is an X-ray of our bulk chemical. In this case, it's a The bulk chemical is tacrolimus, one of the compounds that we're developing. And what we do is we apply already approved, FDA-approved excipients to get that bulk chemical into a solution. Based on the chemistry of that compound, we select different excipients, and once we've identified the most effective way to create that solution, we then drip the solution onto a stainless steel drum. That drum is cryogenically frozen to very low temperatures, in fact, anywhere between -50 and -180 degrees Celsius. The freezing rate is really dependent on the compound we're working on. The steel drum is actually on a pole or a post that goes through the middle of it. It's on the end of a motor and it rotates slowly. So we drip that solution onto that very, very cold surface. And as you can imagine, when you drip something liquid onto something that cold, what happens? Well, it flash freezes. So what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal about flash freezing is the fact that you capture the drug in a highly active state. So the powder ultimately created is highly concentrated. In fact, in our tacrolimus API, it's 97% active drug. So you have a highly concentrated drug wafer that forms on the surface of this stainless steel drum. We capture those wafers into a liquid nitrogen bath, and then those wafers are put into a lyophilizer. And what a lyophilizer does is at very, very low pressure, it sublimes off any of the remaining liquid. And what you get is this beautiful brittle matrix powder. As you can see, it's very porous, very fine, highly concentrated, that we then, in the case where we do it, want to inhale this compound through the lung, we encapsulate it, and then that capsule is given to the patient, who places the capsule into a chamber, into a commercially approved inhaler device. This is manufactured for us by a company called Plastiapi. So again, it streamlines our regulatory process. The capsule goes into the chamber, and the patient pushes these little blue tabs on either end of the device. They're attached to microfine needles that pierce the capsule. The powder is then released, and the patient gently inhales the powder. Most of the IP and most of the secret sauce, if you will, is around the rate of freezing and the methodology of creating the frozen wafer. Let me move on to the next slide. Now, there are other ways to create powders. You might have heard of techniques that go under the label of spray drying, spray freeze drying, nanomilling. In all those situations, it's a much more prolonged process. And what happens when these processes are prolonged is that a lot of different external environmental factors impact the quality of the powder and the concentration of the powder and the yield of the powder that's being created. So whether it's heat or shear or the presence of air and water, ultimately that denaturates the quality of the powder and ultimately limits the amount of application that these different approaches can have on different molecules. One thing to really keep in mind here is that we work on almost every kind of pharmaceutical compound. I really call this technology ubiquitous in nature. So we work on large and small molecules. There's not an issue with the complexity of the molecule, so we can get those into effective powders to be inhaled, where some of these other processes really are limited dramatically in their application, especially in the field of biologics. So I'm going to spend a little time, and I don't have much time here, I only have a half an hour, and I do want to leave time for Q&A. I've talked about voriconazole and tacrolimus. The indications for voriconazole that we're pursuing is invasive pulmonary aspergillosis, patients who will need more chronic administration of voriconazole than oral and IV. These are patients that have chronic pneumonias, really significant COPD, perhaps HIV. And what we will be attempting to confirm in our pivotal trial is at least equal efficacy, but a much better adverse events profile. And the adverse events that we'll hopefully be minimizing are hepatic function irregularities, disruption in eyesight, and other cardiac comorbidities. Tacrolimus, again, lung transplant and the prevention of organ rejection. The key advantage we hope to demonstrate in our pivotal trial is a much better adverse events profile, specifically as it pertains to renal impairment. Renal impairment is very common in chronic tacrolimus use. Oftentimes it could be fatal. So we think that the use of tacrolimus in all of the 4 indications has tremendous advantage potential and also survival opportunity. So there is really where we attempt and what we'll be focusing on in our clinical trials. The target product profiles here will be supported by partnerships in manufacturing. We are producing GMP product for our clinical trials with 3 partners, CoreRx, Irisys, and Experic. They will not only be able to produce clinical batches for us, but also hopefully work with us to scale up once we get to commercial batches. And we just formed a very important relationship with Catalent to start working on our biologics programs. The lead program right now is our AUGMENTA MAB opportunity. So we're well supported in the contract manufacturing space, proven that we can actually make GMP quality product as we move forward. The business model, as I told you earlier, is a focus on our internal portfolio and external partnerships. I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. We've talked about voriconazole and our target product profile. Will be the premise for the design of our clinical trials that will start later this year. And we will also really look at designing these trials with their interim analysis, and those interim analyses will be looked at by mid-year next year. And at that point, we'll start a process for partnering voriconazole, either at that point in the development of the compound or an approval, and that company will take the compound forward into the market and potentially to expand its label. Move on here. The TAC program is also moving into pivotal trials. As I mentioned, the way the phase 1 data has rolled out, we've seen significant blood serum concentrations to allow us to select a much lower dose. And the final results of that phase 1 program will be released by the end of the 3rd quarter, and we'll be moving into the pivotal trial for tacrolimus later this year. As you can see here are the data that show just how well tacrolimus was tolerated and just how well tacrolimus was actually absorbed through the lung. And we're very excited, and we think that these data and this will give us a great opportunity to prove at least equal efficacy and a better adverse events profile as we move forward. So we have a lot that we've accomplished so far this year and years past. As we look forward to the rest of the 3rd quarter and the 4th quarter, as I mentioned, we'll be able to share the top-line data from our tacrolimus phase 1 program, preclinical efficacy for AUGMENTA's monoclonal antibody. We'll continue. We'll start to mature our discussions with the FDA on voriconazole and share with them our protocol for phase 2. We'll also be wrapping up a phase 1B program that we're currently conducting in asthma patients. And the rationale for that is we want to be able to include those patients in our program, a pivotal program. And thus far, we've seen no issues with tolerance or any untoward results for inhalation and any effects on forced expiratory volume by inhaling voriconazole, even in asthmatic patients. And the niclosamide phase 1 programs will start. In the 4th quarter, we'll have our phase 2 programs going forward, complete the AUGMENTA tox program, and start the dosing and complete the dosing on the niclosamide programs as well. So there's a lot going on. Okay, so I think we've gone through that. And let's talk in the remaining few minutes about our business development opportunities. So we will be getting revenues from commercial licensing out for commercial purposes, our internal portfolio. But in addition to the transactions we've already completed, we will be partnering with other pharmaceutical companies and forging some licensing agreements. We actually commit to doing 2 important deals a year, transactions with meaningful economics. And we have very robust business development portfolios in a number of areas. Probably the most rich portfolios in the area of vaccines, and there's a really key reason for that. Let me focus now on the mRNA vaccines that are in the marketplace to immunize patients against COVID-19. As you know, those have to be stored and distributed at very, very cold temperatures. I call it a cold chain distribution scheme. They are manufactured and developed with an aluminum adjuvant. And what we can do is we can take that solution-based vaccine, create a powder. That powder then can be reconstituted back into solution, but be stored at room temperature until that reconstitution occurs. Or, with some of our partners, we're looking at the powder to actually be the method for distribution and inhalation for the vaccine. So it can either be done through the lung or through the nose. Other vaccine partnerships include working on monoclonal antibody-based vaccines, other mRNA programs, universal flu, VSV, etc. Quite a profound and terrific opportunity for the company in the vaccine space. We work with companies on their individual new chemical entities where they're having formulation difficulties. And those new chemical entities really can be applied on a myriad of different therapeutic needs. In the biologics arena, again, a very large amount of our over 45 open material transfer agreements are in the mRNA, sRNA, and macrophage space. In fact, we're working with a majority of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies on 1 or more programs that we hope will lead to meaningful transactions. We have a CRADA with the U.S. Army to help them produce antifungal vaccines. I mentioned our partnership with Leidos and DARPA on countermeasures, our relationships with academic institutions, the University of Georgia, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and the University of Pennsylvania. Again, those are mostly vaccine programs. And lastly, the ability to work on botanicals and bring TFF versions of cannabinoids to the marketplace. In the coming slides, we review in more detail these different programs. I will also, as I go through these, mention the investigators and the researchers we work with. At the University of Georgia, it's Dr. Ted Ross. At USAMRIID, it's Dr. John Dye. Dr. Dye was the inventor of a lot of the vaccines that are used now to treat Ebola. We're working with him very happily. In the monoclonal antibody space and antivirals, again, Union Therapeutics, where TFF's responsibility will be to take niclosamide through the phase 1 programs, and then the Union folks will take that forward. That transaction is valued with all of the milestones and upfront payments at about a $300 million opportunity for TFF. With AUGMENTA, we're co-developing where we share costs through phase 1, where then again we would work with AUGMENTA to find partners to move that program forward. In the biologic arena, the DARPA contract, and so I guess the last thing I want to say about that is we were put through about 6 months worth of diligence and comparison to other potential formulation partners, and we were selected there as the exclusive partner for this project, and this opens the door for us to work with the Department of Defense on other important programs. Felix is a macrophage product. We have other macrophages we're working in, and then in the cannabinoid space, we'll start in California, get our product to the market there, and then expand distribution of TFF-based cannabinoid products across the country. So in summary, I hope I've been able to demonstrate the ubiquitous nature of the technology and communicate clearly the strategy for the company going forward. When you think about it, the company has the ability to create value for patients and our shareholders over an almost limitless amount of time. Our internal portfolio is growing nicely and maturing nicely through the clinic. Our business development opportunities are profound. Our patents, 58 patents, and we're very well capitalized. Actually, we just released second quarter numbers. We have, as of about 2 weeks ago, $51 million in the bank. And that is sufficient runway into 2023, assuming, which is not a really realistic assumption, that we have no revenue infusion to the company between now and then. And we certainly believe that will be the case. So with that, I'm going to close and see if there are any questions. I do thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, please ask. If not, hopefully you'll want to come in contact with the company and be happy to get back to you. So I do have a question that was asked about some of the value catalysts for the company. Hopefully I clearly communicated that with our internal portfolio of moving voriconazole and tacrolimus and the niclosamide AUGMENTA programs forward. And before the end of the year, we hope to close 2 more important transactions while moving the existing transactions forward through monetization. I also just talked about our cash position, which was a question that came in. I said we're well capitalized, and we have a very simple cap table. We have no debt, and that will get the company moving forward in a very, very productive way. See if there are any other, oh, there are a few more questions. Let me scroll down. If you were to partner with a pharma company that already has an FDA-approved drug, such as a vaccine, that wanted to use the technology for dry powder storage and reconstitution, that's a good question. So basically asking me about the regulatory pathway. So it depends really on the stage of the vaccine and what it is. We would hope that there would be an accelerated pathway to the market with some simple bridging studies and a limited safety and clinical profile going forward. So it could be a very streamlined and rapid way to move forward on TFF versions of vaccines. And another question came in about interest from current vaccine makers in our inhalable formulations. The answer to that question is a double yes. As I said, we have over 10, I think, or more open partnerships in the vaccine space. Not only COVID-19, which is important. You know, we are working at COVID-19, but we are not necessarily a COVID-19 company. We have so many opportunities that certainly will be great if we can help in the COVID-19 space. But again, as I communicated, either in NCEs or some platform technologies or even in the botanical space, there are many, many other opportunities to create value for the company in the business development arena. And I think that is the end of the questions. I appreciate those. I appreciate your attention. We're just about at the top of the hour. So again, thank you for your viewership and your interest. And I hope you'll look more into the company. And if you want to reach out, be happy to have further discussions with you. Operator, back to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the TFF Pharmaceuticals presentation. Thank you for joining us. You may now disconnect.